Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing okay. The sun set a while ago and we've got the last of daylight left, and I thought I'd invite you all to my balcony and we can talk about the books that I've read so far. So this is the third weekend of October and it's almost over. I don't know what to think about that. But I thought we could still talk about the books that I've read so far. So let's just get into it. There's a pigeon in my balcony who's nesting, who's sitting on her eggs right now. And if it's possible, I'll try to show you guys, but she tends to be a little fidgety. So right now we have an understanding, but if she lets me, I'll introduce you guys to her as well. But alright, she's getting to me. So before we get to the pigeon, let's get to the books. So the first book that I read this month was The Year of the Witching. You can hear some crackers going off in the background. Anyway, the first book that I read this month was The Year of the Witching, which is amazing. I love this book so much. So this is set in the fictional town of Bethel in the, I guess, 18th century, wherein 18th or 19th century, wherein there's this girl called Emmanuel who her mom was supposed to get married to the leader of their church, of their religion, the prophet, and I think she was married to that guy, but instead she fell in love with someone else, someone who lived on the outskirts of the city and was from a different race than the people who lived inside the city, and she supposedly went off with witches, and she was just generally despised by the entire town for what she did. And Emmanuel was born, and her parents, her mother died, and her father was killed for falling in love with her mother. And she grows up as sort of an outcast, even though her grandparents are raising her and everything. Most of the people in the city don't like her. And then one night, as she is walking home from the city, she gets lost in the dark wood, which is basically the place where all the witches are, and it's the place where you're not supposed to go in. And one of the witches actually gives her mother's diary, and from there a lot of things start going wrong in their town, and she's trying to figure out if she can somehow stop it, or if she's somehow connected to it using her mom's diary and trying to decode her ramblings. And it's very interesting, it's very spooky and scary and dark, and it calls out a lot of misogyny and hypocrisy and sexism, and it was so much fun to read this book. I was hooked from like 50 pages into the book. I usually take about 100 pages to start caring about the characters, but 50 pages into this book I was hooked. I could have binged it. I did not have the time, or I would have binged this book, but yeah, I really enjoyed this book. Then the second book that I read in October was The Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry by C.M. Waggoner. It's this one. And so this is a book about Delhi, a fire witch, who is she's not very well off. She's poor, she's broke, and she runs petty scams to make her money, and that's how she survives. And she also has to look after her mother, who's a drug addict. And one day a very loud auto passes by her house. Anyway, so one day she lies to get herself out of a tight spot about a job that she's applying for, but then she got caught in that lie, so she actually has to go and apply for that job. So she finds herself being the bodyguard of a very rich, well-off, classy lady. She's supposed to guard her in the days before her actual marriage because she's been receiving some death threats. And over there, she meets how is she described? The confident and well-bred Sinilum, and other people, including a necromancer, a reanimated mouse, a shapeshifter, to name a few. And there's a lot going on in this book, and it was fun. Especially, okay, so I really like the way that this book is narrated. For example, Delhi, as a loose rule of her tenure upon this, the world as conceived by mortal man, did not leave the best of first impressions. She hadn't as a child, when she was ill-kempt and badly behaved through no fault of her own, and she still didn't as an adult, when she was ill-kempt and badly behaved through every fault of her own. I don't know, I just thought the writing style of this book was delightful, and she's always like making up words when she's talking and even in the narration itself, and I really enjoyed that. And I also like that this has got chapter titles, and I grew up reading Percy Jackson, okay, and Percy Jackson always had chapter titles. Like, I believe the first chapter of The Lightning Thief is I Vaporize My Maths Teacher, which is, you're intrigued, right? When you're 11 and you see that the first chapter of a new book you're picking up is called I Vaporize My Maths Teacher, you want to read that book. So I like that this book also has a bunch of chapter titles. Like, for example, wherein Delaria talks herself out of a situation that was really entirely her own fault in the first instance and establishes a prospect. This chapter is about her getting that job. So yeah, I really like that. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that's happening in this book, including at one point the character... Actually, you know what, that would be a spoiler. I'm gonna avoid giving out spoilers. It's much more action-packed in the first half, or the first 40-30%, I'd say, than in the rest of it. So if you can't read slow books, this might be a little bit difficult in the second part, but other than that, it was a lot of fun. So that was The Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry. Then I read... What did I read next? I think I read The Six Crimson Cranes. So Six Crimson Cranes is a book by Elizabeth Lim. I read the ebook for that book. I really want to get my hands on a physical copy now. I almost didn't read it because there was an issue with my glasses and I couldn't really look at a screen for a long time, and I was already doing that for work. So I almost skipped this book. I was going to skip it, but then I just thought, well, let me just read it. And I'm so glad I did. It's I think it's a retelling of a fairy tale, but I don't know the actual fairy tale, so I'll just tell you a little bit about the book itself. It's about this girl called Shiori. She's a princess, and she has 6 brothers, and her stepmother curses her all the siblings, and she turns Shiori's brothers into 6 crimson cranes, which is where the title of the book comes from. And she also curses Shiori, and she puts a curse on her so that no one can recognize her, and she can't speak, or one of her brothers is gonna die. And now it's up to her to fix it, to get it right, so that her kingdom is not attacked by the neighboring kingdoms, who see that the heirs are all gone missing and presumed dead, and they want to attack, and she wants to get everything back to the way it was, and she wants to fix it, and she has to fix it because she has no other choice. And it's amazing. It's a good fantasy. It's been a while since I've really liked a fantasy book, and this one sucked me in. The writing is so good. It's like I'm right there. I forgot that I was reading, and because it was all playing in my head. I do believe that I have a very vivid imagination, but I did not have to work at all. Sometimes a book is written in such a way where it says there was a stream and then I have to imagine a stream. But for this book, I did not have to conjure up any streams in my mind. The stream's right there, you know. So I really enjoyed that. So yeah, Six Crimson Cranes it was very good, and because I did not know the fairy tale, I couldn't really predict it. And also, there's a dragon in this book. There's an actual talking, shape-shifting dragon inside this book. There are more than one dragons in this book. So yeah, it's a fun little, not a little, but it's a really fun book, and I really liked it. So the next book that I picked up was actually On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, but I haven't finished it yet. I'm only about 56 pages into the book, and it has 242 pages, so I'm about a fifth of the way in, and it's a really, I don't know what to say. I'll just read out the blurb. So basically, this book is a letter from a son to a mother who cannot read. Written when the speaker, Little Dog, is in his late 20s, the letter unearths a family's history that began before he was born. It tells of Vietnam, of the lasting impact of war, and of his family's struggle to forge a new future. And it serves as a doorway into parts of Little Dog's life his mother has never known, episodes of bewilderment, fear, and passion, all the while moving closer to an unforgettable revelation. And there is a lot in like these 242 pages, and initially I was adding a lot of stuff, but then I just gave up. I started underlining stuff, and if it's something that I'll want to talk about when I talk about this book later on, I'll probably tab that. But other than that, yeah, I'm still reading it, so I don't know if there's a lot to comment on right now. Like, this book started with some of the narrator's own experiences, and where I am in the book right now, they're talking about the experiences of their grandparents, his grandparents. So I am intrigued to know what else there is, but because this is not a fantasy book, I am going through it a little slower than I would, because I devour fantasies. So yeah, I'm reading this currently, and after this, like, while I am also going through that book, I picked up The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab, and it's amazing. So The Near Witch is actually V.E. Schwab's debut novel, and it's the first book that she published, and I believe it's a YA book, and it's a book about a town called Near, and so there's this thing about Near, that there are no strangers in Near. But one night, a stranger shows up in the town and everyone's talking about him. And it's a boy who has no name. And then the very next day, children start vanishing from their beds, taken at night. And no one knows where they are, no one knows how to find them. So obviously the entire town thinks that it's the stranger. But there is also this old tale, sort of a children's rhyme, about a witch. About a witch who lived in Near hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And the Near Witch is only an old story told to frighten children. If the wind calls at night, you must not listen. The wind is lonely and always looking for company. There are no strangers in the town of Near. So these are the truths that Lexi has heard all her life, but when an actual stranger appears outside her home, she knows that at least one of those things is not true. So yeah, so this is like a very interesting book. It's kind of predictable, but it is really fun, and I like how she sets the tone and how everything in this book seems to be alive. So they live out, their town is set on a moor. I'm not a native English speaker, so like moor. So their town is set on a moor, and they the wind is alive, the earth itself is alive, and you know that personification of every single thing in this book, but not in the personification way, but in the they are alive, and you don't know if they are friendly kind of way. It really sets the tone, and I really like that. So it's really fun to read, especially for the lyrical language and the way that everything in this book flows and ebbs and weaves together into one rich tapestry. And any time I read a Schwab book, I start talking in this lyrical way, and there's lightning right outside there, and that's not related to this. Oh, but yeah, there's also a lot of rain in this book. So yeah, I read this book, and that was all the books that I finished reading, not including on Absolutely Gorgeous. But I also started the Once in the Future Witches. I thought, now that I've almost gone through my pile of witchy books, I'd finish it all at once. I'm not very far into this, like maybe 10 pages in. And I don't think I've read enough to actually form an opinion yet. So it's about 3 sisters who are witches, and there's also a suffragette movement. It says basically that there are no witches in Salem. There used to be witches a long time ago, but they're all gone. Except we've got these 3 Eastwood sisters, James Jennifer, Agnes Amaranth, and Beatrice Belladonna, and they join the suffragists of New Salem, and they begin to pursue the forgotten words and ways that might turn the women's movement into the witches' movement. And that is such an interesting premise. You've got suffragettes and you've got witches. What could happen? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. So yeah, I had actually hoped to finish it today, but then I actually had some errands to run, so I had to go out. So maybe I'll finish it next weekend on Halloween. So there are a lot of dogs in my society, and they do this every evening and all night long. So I think it's their time to shine now. So let's just try to sneak a quick look at the pigeon in my balcony, if she'll let me. And that's it.
Okay, so unfortunately the pigeon got spooked and she flew away. But I do have this photo that I was able to take of her, and yeah, this is going to have to do for now because I don't want to worry her too much. So yeah, here's the pigeon. Say hi.
So thank you again for watching this video, for sticking around, and yeah, the pigeon is a treat.